Alright, let's talk about one of the most baffling, infuriating, and downright terrifying mysteries in Warhammer 40k, the disappearance of the Pharos beacon. This wasn't just some minor cog in the Imperium's vast machine. No, the Pharos beacon was one of the most crucial relics in the entire galaxy, a technological marvel that defied the cold, merciless void of space and provided a light in the darkness for Imperial fleets. And then, poof, gone. Stolen. Ripped from reality, leaving only questions and chaos in its wake. Who took it? How? And most importantly, why? To answer that, we need to go back. Way back. Because the Pharos beacon wasn't just an Imperial invention. It had a history stretching far beyond humanity's grasp. And if we want to understand its fate, we need to start at the very beginning. The Pharos beacon was not just another Imperial navigation tool. It was something much older, something far beyond the comprehension of most of the Imperium's scholars and tech priests. A relic of the ancient Necrontire, it functioned in a way that defied the conventional laws of the warp. While the Astronomicon, the psychic lighthouse of the Emperor, relied on the power of a godlike being to pierce the immaterium, Pharos operated on an entirely different principle. It bent space itself, creating a stable point of reference that could be used for near-instantaneous travel across vast distances. In short, it was a miracle, and a very dangerous one at that. For most of its existence, the Imperium didn't even know Pharos existed. It lay hidden on the world of Sotha, buried beneath the planet's surface, waiting to be discovered. And when it was finally unearthed, it became one of the most important strategic assets in the Imperium's arsenal. Unlike the Astronomicon, which only allowed warp travel within the Emperor's psychic reach, Pharos offered something even more terrifying, an independent, stable method of guiding ships through the warp without the need for psychic navigation. If humanity had mastered it, if it had learned to replicate its effects, it could have changed everything. No longer would the Imperium be shackled to the frailties of the warp. No longer would it be dependent on navigators or the Emperor's will. It could have been a revolution, but that was precisely the problem. Pharos was a secret too powerful to be allowed to exist. The Imperium is not known for its willingness to embrace innovation, especially when that innovation comes from Xenos origins. The Mechanicum barely tolerated it. The Inquisition would have likely purged anyone who suggested using it as more than a temporary advantage. And so, despite its breathtaking potential, it remained underused, hidden, almost feared. During the Horus Heresy, Pharos became something of a legend. When Robut Guilliman and his Ultramarines were cut off from Terra, they used it as a lifeline, a way to coordinate their forces and keep the dream of the Imperium alive. And for a time, it worked. But as with all great things in Warhammer 40k, it didn't last. The beacon was sabotaged, its energies unleashed in a cataclysmic event that left scars on reality itself. And though it was weakened, it wasn't completely destroyed. It still functioned, albeit in a more diminished state, which makes its disappearance all the more terrifying. The thing about Pharos is that it wasn't just a tool, it was a weapon. Some believed it could be used to manipulate time and space in ways that even the Necrons barely understood. Others speculated that it had connections to the Webway, or even to something older, something darker. There were rumors that Pharos wasn't just a beacon, it was a prison, a lock holding something at bay. And if that's true, then its theft could be far more catastrophic than anyone realizes. Because let's be clear, Pharos didn't just vanish. Someone took it. And if they knew what they were doing, then they didn't just steal a navigational tool. They stole a key. A key that might open doors that should have remained shut. But who would risk something so dangerous? Who would dare to tamper with forces that even the Necrons once feared? To answer that, we need to look at the moment it was taken, the moment everything changed. Because the Pharos beacon was not stolen in some random act of destruction. It was taken with purpose. And that means someone, somewhere, knew exactly what they were doing. The history of the Pharos beacon is as mysterious as its disappearance. This was not something humanity built. This was something far older, something left behind by a race that had mastered the fabric of reality itself. And as with most ancient relics in Warhammer 40K, the fact that it was still functioning after millions of years should have been a warning, not an invitation. It's widely believed that the Pharos beacon was a Necron construct, though even that term feels inadequate. The Necrons don't build in the way the Imperium does. They shape, they sculpt, they impose their will on the very laws of physics. Pharos wasn't a machine in the way the Mechanicum understood machines. It was a manifestation of raw control over space and time, something that functioned on principles far beyond human comprehension. It's possible that it was originally part of the Necron Pylon network, the same kind of technology designed to suppress the influence of the warp. If that's true, then its existence on Sotha wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate act, a piece of a greater puzzle that humanity barely even realized was there. But then, of course, humanity came along. During the Great Crusade, as the Imperium expanded into the eastern fringe, Imperial explorers stumbled across Sotha. At first, it seemed like just another backwater world, the kind of place that the Imperium would either ignore or absorb without a second thought. But then, they found it. Beneath the surface, buried under layers of rock and time, was something impossible. The beacon. We don't know exactly what went through the minds of those first Imperial scholars and tech priests when they laid eyes on Pharos, but it's easy to imagine the awe, the terror, the sheer disbelief. Here was a device that should not exist, something that defied the fundamental laws of the warp. And yet, it worked. More than that, it worked in a way that no human technology ever had. The Mechanicum must have seen it as a heresy, something too alien to be trusted. But the Ultramarines, ever the pragmatists, recognized its value. They took control of it, and for a time, it became one of the Imperium's most closely guarded secrets. Roboute Guilliman understood its potential immediately. With the Pharos beacon, he could maintain order in the 500 worlds of Ultramar, even as the Horus Heresy tore the Imperium apart. It became a lifeline, a desperate attempt to hold the shattered remnants of civilization together. And for a time, it worked. Even as the warp storms raged, even as chaos closed in, Pharos provided a light in the darkness. But then came the disaster. Konrad Kurza, the Night Haunter, discovered the beacon, and in his infinite cruelty, in his relentless hunger for destruction, he turned it against the Imperium. Through an act of sheer spite and calculated savagery, he unleashed its power in a way no one fully understood, causing a catastrophic event that nearly shattered reality itself. The beacon was damaged, its energy disrupted, but it didn't die. It limped on, weaker than before, but still functioning. Still a threat in the eyes of those who understood what it could do. And that raises an important question. Why wasn't it destroyed? If the Mechanicum feared it, if the Inquisition would have deemed it a heresy, if the Imperium knew it could be used against them, why was it allowed to persist? Some believe that Guilliman himself protected it, understanding that despite its dangers, the Imperium could not afford to throw away such a powerful tool. Others think that even if he had wanted to destroy it, he couldn't. Pharos was not just a machine. It was something else, something that resisted being silenced. And that's what makes its disappearance so terrifying. It was not abandoned. It was not lost to time. Someone took it. And if it took the might of the Night Lords to damage it before, then whoever stole it now must have had knowledge and power beyond anything the Imperium anticipated. Because Pharos was never just a relic. It was a door, and someone, somewhere, just took the key. The disappearance of the Pharos beacon wasn't just a loss. It was a catastrophe. A singular moment of horror that sent ripples through the Imperium, a chilling reminder that no matter how powerful humanity believed itself to be, there were still forces lurking in the void, waiting for the right moment to strike. And when they did, it was with terrifying precision. At first, no one even realized it was gone. The Imperium, vast and bloated as it is, does not react quickly to missing assets, even ones as critical as Pharos. But something felt wrong. Astropaths reported strange disturbances in their visions, flickers of silence where once there had been light. Navigators sensed a disturbance in the immaterial flow of the warp, subtle at first, but growing more erratic with each passing cycle. Then the first real warning came. A fleet trying to navigate the eastern fringe was lost, gone without a trace. That alone might have been written off as an unfortunate casualty of the warp's instability, but then another fleet vanished, and another. The reports piled up. Warp travel had always been dangerous, but this was different. Something was missing, something fundamental. It was only when Imperial forces on the fringes of Ultramar tried to re-establish contact with Sotha that the horrifying truth was discovered. There was no response. Sotha, the world that had housed Pharos for millennia, had gone silent. The moment the first scout ships arrived, the scale of the disaster became clear. The planet was still there. The ruins of the old fortress still stood. But the beacon was gone. No signs of battle, no wreckage, no enemy forces, no lingering signs of warp corruption. It was as if the Pharos beacon had been plucked from existence by an unseen hand. For a relic of its power to simply vanish without so much as a trace was unthinkable, and yet that's exactly what had happened. The Imperium was thrown into a panic. Who could have done this? How? The first suspicion, as always, fell upon the usual enemies of mankind. The Inquisition, predictably, was among the first to declare that the forces of chaos must have been responsible. A ritual, a sacrifice, some unspeakable corruption that had unraveled reality itself and swallowed the beacon whole. But the more rational minds in the Mechanicum disagreed. Pharos wasn't connected to the warp in the same way as Imperial technology. It was something else, something ancient and precise, and if it had been taken, it wasn't by blind, destructive chaos worshippers. It was by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The Necrons were another obvious suspect. After all, Pharos had belonged to them first, and there were few things they hated more than seeing their technology in the hands of lesser races. But if the Necrons had taken it, why wasn't there any sign of them? No monoliths, no legions of soulless warriors, no evidence that they had even set foot on Sotha. And while the Silent King had returned to the galaxy, his motives remained as unknowable as ever. If he had stolen Pharos, what did he plan to do with it? Others whispered of the Drukhari, their talent for striking unseen, making them a prime suspect. But this wasn't their style. They thrived on spectacle, on terror, on cruelty for cruelty's sake. A precision heist like this, one with no bloodshed, no witnesses, that wasn't the work of sadistic raiders. That was something far more deliberate. And then, of course, there was the theory that no one wanted to consider, that it had been taken from within, that somewhere, deep within the labyrinthine power struggles of the Imperium, a faction had decided that Pharos was too dangerous to be left in the open. The Mechanicum. The Inquisition. A rogue chapter of Astartes with knowledge they were never meant to have. The idea that the Imperium had stolen from itself was almost too much to bear. And yet, in the face of so many unknowns, it remained one of the few explanations that made sense. The one thing everyone agreed on was that this wasn't a coincidence. The Pharos beacon hadn't simply failed. It hadn't been destroyed in some random accident. It had been taken, and whoever had taken it had done so with the kind of precision and knowledge that pointed to one undeniable fact. They had planned this. They had waited, and now they had it. The question that haunted everyone was simple. What were they going to do with it? The question of who stole the Pharos beacon is one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in the entire Warhammer 40k universe. This wasn't some random act of destruction, not the mindless rampage of chaos or the brutal efficiency of the Tyranids. This was surgical, deliberate. Someone, somewhere, took the beacon with a purpose in mind. But who? That's where the speculation begins. The first and most obvious suspects were the Necrons. Pharos was, after all, originally their creation. If there was anyone in the galaxy who would have both the knowledge and the motive to take it, it was them. But the problem with blaming the Necrons is that they aren't exactly known for subtlety when it comes to reclaiming what's theirs. If they had come for Pharos, there would have been evidence. Legions of metallic warriors, shattered Imperial defenses, the eerie silence that follows in their wake. And yet, there was nothing. No battle, no signs of their presence. Could the Necrons have developed some new method of extracting their lost relics without leaving a trace? Maybe. But if they did, then the Imperium has far bigger problems to worry about than just the loss of Pharos. Then there's the theory that it was taken by the Drukhari. Their entire civilization is built around raiding and pillaging, and if anyone had the skill to steal something this significant without leaving a trace, it would be them. But why? The Drukhari thrive on suffering and chaos. Pharos wasn't some priceless artifact to be sold in the slave markets of Comera. It wasn't a weapon they could use to carve a new empire for themselves. And while they certainly had the ability to steal it, the question remains, what would they even do with it? That's where this theory starts to fall apart. The Drukhari are masters of taking things, but they only take what benefits them. And unless there's some hidden truth about Pharos that we don't understand, it's hard to see why they would bother. Chaos, as always, is a suspect in anything that goes terribly wrong in the galaxy. And to be fair, the idea that Pharos was stolen by a chaos cult or a war band of traitors isn't entirely far-fetched. The beacon, after all, was a source of stability, an anchor against the madness of the warp. Its removal would undoubtedly cause chaos, and that alone is reason enough for some of the more deranged followers of the Dark Gods to want it gone. But again, there's a problem with this theory. Chaos doesn't do clean jobs. If they had taken Pharos, there would have been evidence, warp corruption, demonic incursions, something. The fact that it simply vanished without any trace of the Imperium's influence suggests that this was done by something, or someone, far more precise. The Tau, of all factions, have also been thrown into the mix. They are known for their technological ambition, their relentless pursuit of advancement. If they had gotten their hands on Pharos, they would undoubtedly try to reverse engineer it, to integrate it into their empire. The idea of the Tau suddenly having access to near-instantaneous interstellar travel is horrifying, but there's one big issue with this theory. They shouldn't even know Pharos exists. Their knowledge of ancient Xenos technology is limited, and while they are resourceful, stealing something of this magnitude without drawing attention seems far beyond their current capabilities. Unless, of course, they had help. And that's where things start getting really interesting. Some have speculated that it wasn't an external enemy that stole Pharos at all, but rather a faction from within the Imperium itself. The Mechanicum, the Inquisition, even a rogue chapter of Astartes. There's no shortage of potential conspirators who might have seen the beacon as a dangerous liability rather than an asset. The Mechanicum, in particular, had a complicated relationship with Pharos. They distrusted it, feared its Xenos origins. If they decided that it was too great a risk, they may have removed it themselves, hiding it away for further study or even outright destruction. The Inquisition, too, could have played a role. There are few organizations in the galaxy with more power, more hidden agendas. If they deemed Pharos a threat to the Imperium's stability, they would not have hesitated to make it disappear. And then there's the most unsettling possibility of all, that it wasn't stolen by anyone in the material realm. Pharos was never fully understood. It was ancient, it was powerful, and it may have been more than just a simple navigation tool. Some believe that it was never meant to be used the way the Imperium used it, that it was part of something larger. And if that's true, then maybe it didn't just get stolen. Maybe it was reclaimed by something older, by something that had been waiting for the right moment, Whoever took Pharos, they did so with purpose. And that means sooner or later, they're going to use it. The real question is, what happens when they do? The way the Pharos beacon was stolen is just as much of a mystery as who took it. This wasn't some ordinary relic that could be plucked off a pedestal and smuggled away in the dead of night. Pharos was a structure, a construct built into the very core of Sotha. It wasn't just sitting there, waiting to be taken. It was fused with the planet itself, deeply integrated into its subterranean network. Removing it should have been impossible. And yet, it's gone. One of the most debated theories is that it was taken through sheer technological superiority. The Necrons, if they were indeed behind this, would have had the means to phase it out of reality entirely. Their mastery of physics is beyond anything humanity can comprehend. If they wanted Pharos back, they wouldn't need a fleet. They wouldn't need to fight. They could have simply activated whatever dormant systems still remained within the beacon, unshackled it from its prison beneath Sotha, and phased it directly into another dimension, out of the Imperium's grasp before anyone could react. It would explain the total lack of physical evidence. No battle, no damage, just an absence, as if it had never been there at all. But that's just one possibility. There are other theories, darker ones. Some believe that Pharos was never truly stolen in the way people imagine, but rather that it was consumed, unraveled in a way that defies conventional understanding. The warp may not have been directly involved in its function, but that doesn't mean it was immune to its influence. A well-executed chaos ritual, performed by sorcerers with knowledge beyond mortal comprehension, could have ripped Pharos from existence. It's not unthinkable that a cabal of chaos worshippers, perhaps even a faction of Thousand Sons or Word-bearers, could have used forbidden rites to turn Pharos into an offering for their dark gods. Imagine it, an artifact of pure logic and order, sacrificed to the madness of the warp. If that's what happened, then Pharos isn't just gone. It's been twisted into something else, something unnatural. And then there's the idea that it was taken from within, a conspiracy, a betrayal. What if Pharos wasn't stolen by an external force, but by someone within the Imperium itself? The Mechanicum has always had a strained relationship with Xenos technology. Despite their obsession with hoarding knowledge, they fear things they don't understand. If a high-ranking faction within Mars or the Ordo Xenos decided that Pharos was too dangerous, they might have orchestrated its removal in secret. A slow, methodical sabotage, a gradual dismantling over decades until, one day, it was simply gone. Hidden away in some forgotten vault, locked beneath the surface of an uncharted world, waiting for the day when the Imperium is desperate enough to seek it out once more. Others believe that its removal was an act of precision warfare, a heist carried out by a force capable of striking unseen. The Drukhari, despite their usual preference for spectacle and suffering, are not incapable of subtlety when it suits them. A silent incursion, a perfectly timed raid, a surgical operation that left no survivors to tell the tale. If they took it, it wasn't for power, it was for profit. Which raises the question, who would pay for something like this? Who in the galaxy has the means and the knowledge to buy a stolen Necron artifact? The strangest possibility of all, though, is the idea that Pharos was never meant to be taken at all, that it was activated. What if it wasn't removed, but instead used for its true purpose? If Pharos was part of a greater network, a mechanism spanning the galaxy, then maybe, just maybe, it wasn't stolen. It was summoned. A failsafe buried deep within its programming, triggered at the right moment, causing it to disappear in the way it was always meant to. If that's the case, then whoever took it didn't just steal a relic. They started something that cannot be undone. However it was taken, one thing is clear. This was no ordinary theft. This was a carefully orchestrated event, executed with knowledge beyond what the Imperium should have allowed anyone to possess. And that means that somewhere out there, someone knows the truth. The real question is, will the Imperium find them before it's too late? The disappearance of the Pharos beacon has sparked countless theories among Warhammer 40K fans, each one wilder than the last. Some are grounded in established lore, others stretch into pure speculation, but all of them share one thing: an understanding that whatever happened to Pharos, it wasn't random. Someone, somewhere, made a move that could change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The only question is, who? One of the most popular theories is that the Necrons were behind it, but not in the way most people assume. Instead of a straightforward reclamation mission, some fans believe Pharos was never truly under the Imperium's control to begin with. It was always a Necron construct, and like all Necron technology, it was designed with built-in fail-safes. The moment humanity dug too deep, activated it too frequently, or tried to harness it for their own ends, the beacon simply executed a pre-programmed directive, returning itself to its true masters. If that's true, then the Necrons never needed to steal it. They just waited for it to wake up, and now, deep within the tomb worlds, Pharos might be part of something much bigger, something that has been in motion for millions of years. Then there's the theory that the Mechanicum took it. This one makes a disturbing amount of sense. The Adeptus Mechanicus has never been comfortable with Pharos. They feared it, distrusted it, yet at the same time they craved its secrets. Some fans believe that a rogue faction within Mars orchestrated its disappearance, either to study it in secret or to prevent the Imperium from relying on a Xenos construct. If true, that means Pharos is still out there, locked away in some hidden forge world, its true purpose being unraveled by the most brilliant and heretical minds in the galaxy. But if that's the case, why keep it a secret? Unless, of course, they found something they weren't supposed to. Another, more terrifying theory suggests that the beacon was stolen not by any material force, but by the warp itself. This is the most extreme idea, but it's not impossible. Pharos may have been a Necron creation, but it was used by humans, and human interaction with ancient Xenos artifacts never ends well. Some believe that prolonged exposure to psychic energies may have tainted it, creating a feedback loop that eventually caused it to be pulled into the Imperium. If this is true, then Pharos isn't just missing. It's trapped in a place where reality itself bends and breaks. Worse still, something might have taken it from the other side. A chaos god? A greater demon? A force older than even the ruinous powers? No one knows, and that might be the scariest possibility of all. A more niche but incredibly intriguing theory is that Pharos was taken by an unknown Xenos faction, one that the Imperium has yet to encounter, or one that has been hiding in the shadows all along. Some fans argue that Pharos wasn't just a navigation tool, but part of a larger network, something far older and more complex than the Imperium ever understood. What if another species, something even older than the Necrons, saw it as their property? What if Pharos was never meant to be a beacon, but a warning? And now, with it gone, something is coming. And then there's the most unsettling theory of them all, that the Imperium itself orchestrated the disappearance of Pharos, but not because it was dangerous, because it was needed elsewhere. Some fans speculate that the Imperium is engaged in a war so secret, so catastrophic, that they needed Pharos in a way no one else could understand. Maybe it was transported to an undisclosed location, hidden away in preparation for some coming disaster. If that's true, then someone in the highest levels of Imperial power made the decision that Pharos was more important elsewhere. And if they were willing to take that risk, it means whatever is coming is worse than we can possibly imagine. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is clear: Pharos didn't just disappear. It was taken, and sooner or later, whoever took it is going to use it. The only question is, what happens when they do? The disappearance of the Pharos beacon is bad enough, but the real question is, can it ever be recovered? Or is it lost forever? Just another ghost in the long, tragic history of the Imperium. The truth is, if there's one thing humanity has proven time and time again, it's that it never stops fighting. Even when all logic says something is impossible, the Imperium finds a way. But Pharos isn't just another lost relic. Its theft wasn't an accident. It was deliberate, methodical. Whoever took it knew what they were doing, and that makes finding it again infinitely more complicated. The most obvious answer would be to track whoever stole it, but that's easier said than done. There were no signs of a battle, no trail left behind, no wreckage, no signals. It's as if it was plucked out of existence, removed with such precision that it defies conventional investigation. That alone makes recovery a nightmare. How do you find something when there's no evidence it was ever taken in the first place? The Imperium is vast, but it's also blind. Without a clear lead, searching for Pharos is like trying to find a single grain of sand in an endless desert storm. That doesn't mean all hope is lost. Some believe that traces of Pharos' energy might still exist, rippling through the fabric of reality. If that's true, then the Imperium's best chance lies with the Mechanicum or the most gifted navigators, those capable of sensing shifts in the immaterial. But even if they could detect a signature, that doesn't mean they could reach it. If Pharos was phased out of reality by Necron technology or pulled into the warp, then retrieving it might be an impossibility. And if it was taken somewhere truly unreachable, like the Webway, then it's already gone. That raises another possibility. If the beacon itself can't be recovered, could it be rebuilt? This is where opinions among fans start to diverge. On one hand, the Imperium is notorious for losing and rediscovering technology. It wouldn't be the first time humanity has salvaged knowledge once thought lost. If they could find another similar construct, maybe another dormant Necron artifact buried beneath the surface of some forgotten world, then in theory, a new Pharos could be constructed. The problem? The Imperium barely understood Pharos when they had it. Replicating something they never fully controlled would be a monumental challenge, one that the Mechanicum might not even be willing to attempt. And let's say, hypothetically, that they do manage to rebuild it. That still leaves a massive issue: stability. Pharos was an anomaly, a singularity of function that defied conventional technology. Could the Imperium really create something that would function the same way? Or worse, what if their attempts at replication backfire? What if, in trying to recreate Pharos, they unleash something they don't understand? Given the Imperium's history of catastrophic mistakes when dealing with Xenos relics, the possibility of a disaster is very, very real. Some fans have a more radical theory. Maybe Pharos isn't meant to be found. Maybe it's gone for a reason. If it was truly a lock holding something back, if its disappearance wasn't a theft but an activation, then trying to bring it back might be the worst thing the Imperium could do. What if the beacon was never meant to be a tool for mankind? What if it was something far more dangerous, and its absence is merely the beginning of something far worse? One way or another, the Imperium won't stop searching. It can't afford to. The galaxy is growing darker, more unstable, and the loss of Pharos is a blow they may never fully recover from. But if they do find it, if they bring it back, then the real question is whether they will be reclaiming a lost treasure, or awakening something that should have remained forgotten. The disappearance of the Pharos beacon is not just a historical footnote. It's not some minor incident that the Imperium can afford to ignore. This is something that could change the balance of power in the galaxy in ways that no one fully understands yet. The real danger isn't just that it's gone, it's that we don't know what happens next. And in a setting like Warhammer 40K, the unknown is almost always worse than the worst-case scenario. The immediate consequences are obvious. Pharos was one of the few stable alternatives to the Astronomicon, a tool that gave the Imperium a rare sense of control in a galaxy dominated by the chaos of the warp. Without it, the Imperium is more vulnerable than ever. The eastern fringe, already difficult to navigate, is now even more isolated. Entire fleets could be lost, entire sectors cut off. If the beacon had been fully functional, it could have been a game-changer in the Imperium's war against the Great Rift's instability. But now? Now, it's just another light snuffed out in the growing darkness. But let's think bigger. This wasn't random. Someone took Pharos for a reason. That alone raises terrifying implications. If it was the Necrons, then they've reclaimed something that could give them an advantage over every other faction in the galaxy. If Pharos was part of a larger network, then this might not just be about navigation. It could be about power on a scale humanity has never encountered before. What if the Necrons aren't just trying to retrieve lost relics, but to reactivate something ancient, something vast? If Pharos was one piece of a greater whole, then its disappearance might not be the end of a mystery. It might be the beginning of a war. And what if it wasn't the Necrons? If Pharos was taken by chaos, then the consequences could be even worse. Pharos was, in many ways, an anchor of stability. What if its disappearance wasn't just about stealing technology, but about breaking something fundamental? If the beacon was suppressing something, holding back the warp in ways no one understood, then its absence could be an omen of something catastrophic, a shift in the balance of reality itself. Then there's the theory that this is part of a larger Imperial conspiracy. If Pharos was taken by the Mechanicum, by the Inquisition, or by some other hidden hand, then we have to ask why. Was it fear? Did someone decide that it was too dangerous to be left in the open? Or was it something more deliberate? If the Imperium itself orchestrated this, then that means they know something we don't. That means they saw something coming, something they were either trying to prevent or prepare for. And that idea is almost worse than any Xenos or Chaos threat, because if the Imperium is scared enough to make a move like this, then whatever's coming is bigger than we can imagine. There's also a final, more unsettling possibility. What if Pharos wasn't stolen? What if it left? What if it was never really under Imperial control to begin with? If it was a Necron construct, then it may have had functions beyond what anyone realized. What if its disappearance wasn't an attack, but an activation? A signal? A trigger for something sleeping beneath the surface of reality? What if Pharos was never meant to stay in one place at all? No matter what the truth is, the one thing we can be sure of is that this isn't over. Pharos didn't just vanish into the void. It was taken, and it will be used. The only question is who will make their move first. The Imperium, desperate to reclaim what was lost. The Necrons bringing their ancient plans to fruition. Chaos, exploiting yet another weakness in the material realm. Or something else entirely. Something we haven't even begun to comprehend. The Pharos beacon was more than just a tool. It was a mystery, a weapon, a warning. And now that it's gone, the galaxy will have to brace itself for what comes next. Because whatever that is, it won't be good. The disappearance of the Pharos beacon isn't just an isolated event. It's a power shift, one that affects nearly every major faction in the galaxy in ways that might not even be fully understood yet. This isn't just about the Imperium losing a critical asset. It's about what happens when one of the few remaining sources of stability in the galaxy suddenly vanishes. Every faction, every warlord, every hidden player in the shadows now has to reassess their plans. Because something big just changed, and in Warhammer 40K, that kind of shift never happens without consequences. For the Imperium, the loss of Pharos is catastrophic. It was one of the few things that allowed them to exert some control over the eastern fringe, and now that control is slipping. Supply lines that relied on the beacon's guidance are in chaos. Entire sectors could find themselves stranded. Worse still, this loss comes at a time when the Imperium is already struggling with the aftermath of the Great Rift. Warp storms rage unchecked, the Astronomicon flickers, and now, one of the last stable points of navigation is gone. It's another nail in the coffin of a crumbling empire, and the longer Pharos remains missing, the worse things will get. But what about the Necrons? If they were behind this, then they've just reclaimed a weapon that could fundamentally alter the balance of power. If Pharos was part of their ancient technology, then its disappearance could mean that the Necron dynasties are preparing for something big. Maybe they're reactivating long-dormant structures, linking together pieces of a lost network that the galaxy has yet to understand. Some fans even speculate that the Silent King himself could be involved, that this is part of some grander plan to reassert Necron dominance. If that's the case, then the Imperium isn't just facing a stolen artifact. It's facing the potential resurgence of an empire that predates humanity itself. Chaos, of course, thrives on instability, and this is exactly the kind of event that they can exploit. If Pharos was suppressing something, some lingering psychic barrier, some force that held the warp at bay, then its absence could be opening doors that were never meant to be opened. The ruinous powers don't need to have stolen it themselves to benefit from its loss. They just need to be ready to strike when the cracks start forming. Maybe it was Tzeentch, orchestrating a complex scheme that will only make sense centuries down the line. Maybe it was the word-bearers, seeing Pharos as an insult to their gods and ensuring it was wiped away. Or maybe it wasn't taken by chaos at all, but its disappearance is still playing into their hands. Because now, there's one less light in the darkness, one less shield against the ever-growing tide of corruption. And then there are the other Xenos factions, each of which could benefit in their own way. The Tau Empire, for example, has always struggled with the limitations of their own space travel. Unlike the Imperium, they don't have navigators or warp-based methods of navigation. If they could get their hands on Pharos, even a fragment of it, it could revolutionize their entire way of war. Faster, safer interstellar travel would allow them to expand at an unprecedented rate, pushing the borders of the Tau Empire further than ever before. If they were responsible, then they might have just secured the greatest technological advantage in their history. And what about the Drukhari? At first glance, they don't seem to have much reason to care, but imagine this. What if Kamara itself is tied to whatever network Pharos was connected to? The webway is already fragile, broken in places, unstable in others. If Pharos was a part of some lost Necron transit system, something that allowed the manipulation of space itself, then its disappearance might be causing shifts in the webway that the Drukhari are only just beginning to notice. If Kamara starts experiencing strange disruptions, unexplained tears in its reality, then the Archons will have no choice but to act. And if they believe Pharos is the cause, they won't hesitate to wage war to reclaim it. Even the Tyranids might be affected by this. Some have theorized that Pharos was more than just a beacon. It was a lure. A light in the dark that kept the Great Devourer's attention focused on certain regions of space. If that's true, then its absence could send the Hive fleets in new, unpredictable directions. It might even mean that a portion of the Tyranid threat that was once kept at bay by Pharos' influence is now free to roam unchecked. If the Imperium thought the Tyranids were dangerous before, they might be about to experience something far worse. The loss of Pharos isn't just about one faction, it's about the entire galaxy shifting in ways that no one fully understands yet. Someone took it, and that means they have a plan. But whether that plan benefits them alone, or whether it will reshape the fate of the entire galaxy, remains to be seen. What is certain, though, is that the consequences are already unfolding, and before long, everyone, Imperium, Xenos, Chaos, will be forced to reckon with them. The question of whether the Pharos beacon will ever return to the Warhammer 40K narrative is one of those lingering mysteries that keeps fans speculating. It's the kind of plot thread that feels too important to simply be forgotten. Yet at the same time, the setting of Warhammer 40K is littered with ancient relics, lost technology, and unresolved stories that may never be revisited. So, what are the chances that we'll see Pharos again? On one hand, the sheer mystery surrounding its disappearance makes it prime material for a future storyline. Games Workshop has been slowly but surely advancing the narrative in recent years, introducing major upheavals like the return of Robot Guilliman, the Great Rift, and the Silent King's resurgence. If they wanted to reintroduce Pharos, it could fit seamlessly into any of these ongoing arcs. Its absence has left a void that could easily be filled with a dramatic return, perhaps as a lost relic recovered by desperate Imperial forces, or as the catalyst for a new war between the Imperium and an unknown enemy. One of the strongest arguments for Pharos making a comeback is its connection to Guilliman. He relied on it during the Horus Heresy, and while he may not have spoken much about it in recent lore, The fact that he is now in a position of power means that if anyone were to seek it out, it would be him. The Imperium is stretched thin, struggling to maintain control over a fractured galaxy. The Astronomicon is no longer the stable, unwavering beacon it once was. If Guilliman knew Pharos was out there, even if it was buried in Mechanicum vaults or stolen by another faction, wouldn't he make it a priority to reclaim it? It's not impossible to imagine a future campaign where the Imperium embarks on a desperate mission to find and reactivate the beacon, using it as a last-ditch effort to stabilize its crumbling empire. But there's another angle to consider. Maybe Pharos isn't meant to return in the hands of the Imperium. What if its comeback is tied to something else entirely? The Necrons have been receiving more attention in recent years, with the Silent King's return being a major development in the setting. If Games Workshop wanted to give them an even greater presence, revealing that the Silent King has secretly recovered Pharos and is using it as part of some larger ancient plan would be a massive narrative shift. It would reinforce the idea that the Necrons are not just another faction fighting for scraps in the galaxy, but one that is actively reclaiming its lost empire, piece by piece. There's also the possibility that Pharos might return, but in a completely different form. We've seen relics in Warhammer 40k change over time, corrupted by chaos, repurposed by Xenos, or even integrated into strange new technologies. What if Pharos was twisted into something else? What if the Mechanicum tried to replicate it and ended up creating a warped, half-functional version that doesn't work the way it used to? What if Chaos got their hands on it and turned it into something nightmarish, a beacon not of stability, but of madness? The potential for a corrupted Pharos, broadcasting insanity across the stars, is the kind of grimdark storytelling that fits perfectly in Warhammer 40k. Of course, there's always the possibility that Games Workshop will never revisit Pharos at all. It wouldn't be the first time an important relic or piece of lore simply vanished into the void, never to be mentioned again. The universe is vast, and there are countless stories competing for attention. It's entirely possible that Pharos will remain one of those lost mysteries, a piece of history that exists purely for speculation and fan theories rather than as a central element of future narratives. But if there's one thing Warhammer 40k has proven time and time again, it's that nothing stays buried forever. The return of Guilliman, the resurgence of ancient Necron threats, the rise of the Tau Empire. Every few years, something thought to be lost resurfaces, reshaping the galaxy in unexpected ways. If Pharos ever does return, it won't be as just another relic. It will be as something far more dangerous. And when it does, the entire balance of power in the galaxy could shift in an instant. The real question isn't whether Pharos will come back. It's whether the Imperium will be ready for what happens when it does. The disappearance of the Pharos beacon is one of those mysteries that lingers in the back of every Warhammer 40k fan's mind, a gaping void in the fabric of the lore that refuses to be neatly tied up. We know what Pharos was, an ancient relic of impossible power, a guiding light in the darkness, and perhaps something far more dangerous than anyone realized. We know that it played a vital role in the survival of the Imperium, especially during the darkest days of the Horus Heresy. And we know that, against all logic, it was taken. Not destroyed, not lost, taken with deliberate intent by a force that left no trace behind. But beyond that, everything is speculation. We've explored the most likely culprits, from the Necrons reclaiming their lost technology, to Chaos corrupting it for their own twisted ends, to a secret conspiracy within the Imperium itself. Each theory has its own merit, but none of them offer a definitive answer. And that's what makes this mystery so terrifying. Their asterisk is asterisk no clear answer, no comforting explanation. Just questions. Questions that may never be answered. What if the beacon was never meant to be in human hands? What if the very act of using it was a mistake, something the Imperium should never have done? What if it was always counting down to this moment, waiting for the right time to activate, to fulfill some purpose that has yet to reveal itself? The idea that Pharos was stolen for a reason is unsettling, but the idea that it was asterisk meant asterisk to disappear is even worse. It suggests a plan unfolding in the background, a grand design beyond the understanding of even the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Some fans believe that, in time, the Imperium will find it again, that somewhere, deep in the void, a trail will emerge leading them back to the beacon. And when they do, they will have a choice: reclaim it or leave it buried, hoping that whatever took it never decides to use it. Others think Pharos is gone for good, that it was swallowed by a force beyond human comprehension, and that trying to recover it would be nothing short of suicidal. But the worst possibility, that it's already being used, that somewhere out there, Pharos has already begun reshaping reality in ways the Imperium has yet to realize. That its disappearance wasn't the end of a story, but the beginning of something much, much bigger. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain: this mystery isn't over. Not by a long shot. And sooner or later, the galaxy is going to feel the consequences. When that day comes, we'll finally understand what Pharos was really for. The only question is, will humanity survive long enough to find out? If you enjoyed diving into this mystery and want to hear more about the darkest, strangest, and most unexplored corners of Warhammer 40k lore, make sure to subscribe. The galaxy is vast, brutal, and full of secrets, and there's always more to uncover.